Labour's leader under pressure after a bashing at the ballot box. Keir Starmer suffered a stunning by-election defeat in Hartlepool to the Conservatives, as the Tories also gain a string of councils across England. Boris Johnson says the results show he's on the right track.
It's early days, but a very encouraging set of results so far, and I think that's really because we've been focusing as government on our priorities, people's priorities.
And counting continues in Scotland in a result that could shape the future of the UK. We'll take you through what all this means for all the parties and our futures as Robert Peston joins us in the studio, also this lunchtime. The under-40s to be given a choice of COVID vaccines as the India strain here becomes a variant of concern. Kent Police released this image of a man they say is key in the search for Julia James's killer, and
I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do.
The local lad backing his local team. Ed Sheeran becomes a new shirt sponsor for Ipswich Town.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Charlene White.
Good afternoon. The full election results from England haven't all been counted yet, but it's been a brutal result for Labour so far. They suffered an historic defeat in Hartlepool's by-election, losing the seat for the first time in 47 years to the Conservatives. Now Labour leader Keir Starmer is facing a backlash from some of his party to change course. The other big race today, the Scottish Parliament results, the first of those have started to come in. We'll bring you the latest on what we know so far in just a moment. But first, our political correspondent Carl Dinnan on the beating Labour have suffered in England.
It was a big night for Jill Mortimer in Hartlepool.
Conservative Party candidate, 15,500.
And a big night for Conservative activists elsewhere around the country too. But so far, Hartlepool's is the standout result of these elections.
I'm incredibly proud of the campaign my team and I have run in Hartlepool. I'm also immensely proud to be the first Conservative MP in Hartlepool for 57 years.
And it's only the second by-election in 40 years where a governing party has taken a seat from the opposition. Alongside some successful council results for the Tories, it looks like a vindication for the Prime Minister.
A very encouraging set of results so far, and I think that's really because we've been focusing as government on our priorities, people's priorities, bouncing back from the pandemic as far as we can, getting through it.
There's no doubt Hartlepool has been a humiliation for Labour as the Conservatives succeeded in framing themselves as the party of change.
People are just sick of Labour. Obviously, things, aren't getting done. That's why everybody's voted Conservative this time.
Just fed up. Labour's held Hartlepool for so long and nothing's ever happened.
Probably because everybody's hoping for a big change and I hope they get it. The town just couldn't keep on going like it was.
And it's not just Hartlepool. Tories were jubilant as they took councils in Harlow, Dudley, Northumberland, Nuneaton and Bedworth. Labour can only wonder what the Welsh Senate results will deliver later today. Sir Keir Starmer said he would take responsibility for the results, but there is disagreement within his party as to what he should do next. What should Keir Starmer's response to the results overnight be? Should it be a bit more of what Jeremy Corbyn was doing or a bit further away from that?
Really, the results in Hartlepool and other areas around the country should mean that he now presses the reset button and goes back to what he said he would do, which is making the moral case for socialism.
Anybody that thinks that the way to proceed is to go back to what delivered us our worst defeat in 85 years has got their head on the wrong way round. What we need to do is move back closer to the British people.
But that will be hard because the Tories didn't just win in Hartlepool, they won handsomely, suggesting a post-Brexit realignment of British politics with which Labour are struggling to catch up. Carl Dinnan, ITV News, Westminster.
Well, let's take a look now at the state of the political parties and how they stand in the English council results. Of 17 councils which have declared, this is how it looks so far. The Conservatives have 164 councillors, that's up 56. Labour have 141, that's down 57. Liberal Democrats have 40, that's up 4. And Greens have 7, which is up 3. So in terms of councils won or lost, the Conservatives have taken control of 8 councils. That's a gain of 4, including Northumberland, Dudley, Nuneaton in the Midlands and Harlow in Essex. Labour have control of 6, a loss of 1. And we're still waiting on the results to roll in from Scotland, where counting's taking place for the 129-seat Scottish Parliament. Let's go to our Scotland correspondent, Peter Smith, who's at Nicola Sturgeon's count in Glasgow. Peter, a slow start to declare. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we can read very little into this so far, with only 2 seats having declared. We're seeing the Lib Dems holding in Orkney and the SNP holding on to Aberdeen Donside. That's both as you would expect. They were very safe seats, and so we can't read too much into that. What we can say is that turnout is up in both of those seats, and anecdotally here in Glasgow we're seeing turn up across the board from the seats that they've looked at, and from the polling stations yesterday it was certainly indicators that it has been a very busy election. Voters are motivated because the prospect of a second independence referendum is on the horizon, and that is one of the key issues behind this election, of course, after the COVID recovery plan. But this isn't going to be about those safe seats. This is going to come down to just a handful of key swing seats. So although there are 129 seats in the Scottish Parliament, we are really looking at just 9 target seats that the SNP are trying to win. If they win just 6 of those, then that will show us that they are definitely on course for a majority.
So, Peter, when will we know who's won then?
Well, we are starting the count now. There was no overnight count here in Scotland, so by tonight we'll have that indicator of how well the SNP are doing, but the full result won't be clear until tomorrow night, possibly even Sunday morning. These are unprecedented times. This is an election count in the time of a pandemic, but what's at stake here is about the independence referendum, what happens next, and in many ways when we find out that result, that's just the starting gun for what comes next. The SNP wants to secure a majority so they can say they have the strongest mandate possible to go to Boris Johnson, say that Scotland has spoken, and Scots want that opportunity to have their say, to vote again on whether they should leave the United Kingdom. If the SNP fall short, it's likely they will still be propped up by another pro-independence party, likely the Scottish Greens. There's no constitutional difference really, legally or constitutionally, over whether the SNP gets a majority or not. It comes down to how much pressure they're able to put onto the Prime Minister. But it's unlikely that it will be Monday morning that Nicola Sturgeon is knocking on the doors of Downing Street asking for that referendum. It's likely that that could take a few years.
OK, Peter, thank you. Well, counting started in Wales to elect 60 politicians to the Welsh Parliament. The election there is the first to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. No party's ever won an outright majority, meaning the party which has won the most seats will be expected to enter into talks with other parties or independent members in order to form the next Welsh government. The process may be adjourned until tomorrow morning if it's believed staff won't be able to finish counting ballots by this evening. A lot to get through there, but I'm joined by our political editor, Robert Peston. Robert, why do you think Labour have done so badly in England?
So let's be clear, these really are terrible results. It's not just that its share of the vote fell in Hartlepool, but also in council. I mean, in the council results we've seen so far. And normally, opposition parties at this stage of a parliament are making progress. And the fact that they're going backwards is devastating, particularly when the party is under new leadership, Keir Starmer. And so many people within the Labour Party blamed the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn and blamed Brexit for the landslide for the Tories in 2019. Corbyn has gone, Brexit is done, and yet voters are still turning their backs on the Labour Party. Now, I think there are some sort of drivers of that it's hard to blame Keir Starmer for. The vaccine rollout has gone well. The Prime Minister is definitely picking up popularity as a result of that. Nothing Keir Starmer could have done about that. But, it's widely believed that the Tory party, the government's management of COVID throughout hasn't been brilliant. Knocking down late, not getting hold of really vital equipment early enough. Lots of people believe that tens of thousands of lives, were lost because of government mismanagement of the crisis. But the Tory party has not been damaged by that. The fundamental point is that Keir Starmer is simply not cutting through. People basically say on the doorstep, and I've heard this from lots of Labour candidates, that people just say, I'm just not sure about Keir Starmer, so a mountain to climb for him.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because despite this war of words and battle behind the scenes that we've been hearing so much about over the last few weeks, it seems as though Boris Johnson's grip of the party is very much assured.
Look, any party leader, any prime minister's grip of a party is assured when they are so ahead in the polls. There is chaos in Downing Street, be under no illusion. Boris Johnson himself has been under pressure for borrowing money from the Tory party to pay for his wallpaper, something that would damage most prime ministers. But for whatever reason, voters are saying they don't care about that. What they care about is that they're getting their lives back. I think many voters are sort of grateful that the Tory party has been chucking money at them through the furlough scheme and through support for those who own their own businesses. Now, these are policies that would normally be associated with the Labour Party, but the Tories are now doing things that Labour would do. So it is very, very hard for Labour. And I think there's just one other point that one needs to make to understand the magnitude of this shift, this earthquake, some would say. It is that the Tories have been in power since 2010 in one way or another. A decade on, they've had the kind of landslide at the end of 2019, repeated today, that Labour had in 97 when it had been out of office for 17, 18 years. The Tories are getting this kind of landslide having been in office, and they can assume on the basis of these results they're going to be in power for another 10 years. This is terrifying for the Labour Party.
OK, Robert, thank you. OK, let's move on to today's other main story. And people under the age of 40 are going to be offered an alternative to the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID vaccine. Up until now, the policy of giving a different jab only applied to the under 30s. But the age threshold has been raised after the UK's medicines regulator reported new figures on blood clots last week. Neil Connery has more.
As the COVID vaccine rollout continues apace, concerns over extremely rare blood clots linked to the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine have prompted today's change in guidance. Now, most adults under the age of 40 will be given an alternative to the Oxford AstraZeneca jab. The risk of a clot is roughly 1 in 100,000 for people in their 40s, but it rises to 1 in 60,000 for people in their 30s.
We hope that the advice will, if anything, serve to boost confidence and allow people who are being called up for vaccination now and in the next few weeks, who are mainly younger people, to feel able to step up, accept the vaccine and be vaccinated.
Up to the end of last month, the medicines watchdog, the MHRA, received 242 reports of blood clots in the UK, all in people who'd had the AstraZeneca jab. That's out of 28.5 million doses administered. These clots occurred in people aged between 18 and 93. Officials stress the clear benefits of the Oxford AstraZeneca jab continue to outweigh the risks for the vast majority of people. They say the balance of benefits over risks is very favourable for older people, but is more finely balanced for younger people, hence today's decision.
The message is still that actually the vaccine is effective and that it is safe to take in most cases. The risks are still very, very small. But it sounds like because we have the opportunity to use other vaccines, our portfolio is growing per se. We have the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines to offer as well, that the JCVI have said, well, if there's an opportunity to offer another vaccine for those under the 40, then we should take it.
Today's decision shouldn't affect the timetable to offer everyone over 18 their first COVID jab before the end of July. Neil Connery, ITV News.
Well, we're joined now by our science editor, Tom Clark. And Tom, why have they decided to do this?
It's got less in a way to deal with an increasing picture of the risk associated with the vaccine. It's more about what's going on with COVID in the country and the supplies of vaccines that we've got. Because although the individual risk to someone who's between 30 and 39 of the vaccine is currently higher than COVID, that's why they've decided to advise against it. The bigger risk is not vaccinating those people with AstraZeneca. And then in a few months' time, when rates of COVID go back up again, you're left with unvaccinated people and having to pay catch up, and therefore more people might actually end up suffering as a result. The balance tipped, and that's why they've made this announcement now, is because they can see for at least the coming months the risk of COVID is going to remain really low. But also, we're going to have alternatives to offer these people so that we can safely say, right, actually, we're not going to give you AstraZeneca because there is that slightly elevated risk as you get younger, but because we've got an alternative, because we know your risk is going to remain low for a long time. The worst case scenario we could be in is people not getting vaccinated. You are much, much more at risk. Any vaccine is better than none in the current situation we're in. So that's really important. And that's anyway they made this decision today. And today we also had an update on variants as well, didn't we? That's correct. So obviously a lot of concern, given things are going so well. One of the few things that could ruin us all for us at this phase, other than people losing confidence in vaccines, which there's no indication of, is new variants coming in. Obviously the India variant, big concern, huge problems over in India. We have seen a doubling of cases of one particular subtype of the India variant in England in the last week. And that's mean they've elevated that particular subvariant to this variant of concern status, which means they can start surge testing for it, etc. However, we shouldn't be as worried about this one as the South Africa variant, for example, because although it looks quite transmissible, it's actually, interesting, this variant lost one of the key mutations that's likely to make it a problem for vaccines or antibodies. So in fact, although there is some concern, and we are going to keep an eye out for it, it's not as worrying, possibly as some of those other variants out there we're also keeping an eye on. OK, Tom, thank you. And later this afternoon, the government will announce the countries that have made it onto its green list. The new traffic light system is about which destinations we can travel to once the ban on foreign holidays is lifted on May the 17th, without having to self-isolate when we come home. Amber countries will still require a 10-day quarantine. The list is expected to be quite short and could include the likes of Gibraltar, Israel, Portugal and Malta. And our website will have all the details as they emerge from 5 o'clock. Police have released an image of a man who they say could be the key in the investigation into the murder of PCSO Julia James. The community support officer was found dead in a wooded area near her home in Snowdown in Kent 10 days ago. Kit Bradshaw is in Folkestone, where detectives will give an update this afternoon. Kit, what more do we know about the man who police want to talk to?
Charlene, detectives say they firmly believe this man has information which could help their investigation into the murder of Julia James. And they've released a remarkably clear photograph of him taken the day after the serving PCSO was killed in Aylsham, around half a mile away from where her body was discovered. The 53-year-old had headed out on a dog walk with her Jack Russell Toby, something she did regularly in the countryside surrounding her home, but she died from significant head injuries. Her body found by members of the public on a path close to woodland around 300 yards away from her home. And since then, Kent Police has launched a major murder investigation. Hundreds of officers involved in searching a vast area of the East Kent countryside. Just this morning, I saw a team of officers around 2 miles away from the crime scene, combing through woodland for any clues, any evidence that could help them catch the killer of one of their own. But in the 10 days of this investigation so far, there hasn't been any major breakthroughs. But the release of this image is undoubtedly the most significant development so far. A man that police say they think could be key to catching Julia James's killer. They've urged him to come forward, anyone who knows him to get in touch with them. And this is a crime now with a £10,000 reward being offered by Crime Stoppers. And the detectives here say that the members of the public should come forward so Julia's family can find the answers they deserve.
Kit, thank you. An independent inquiry into squalid and dangerous housing conditions in a London tower block has found that Croydon Council failed in its duty to keep tenants safe. The report follows an ITV News investigation which uncovered families living in flats with severe leaks, mould and damp for more than 4 years. Housing experts described the conditions as the worst they'd ever seen. The inquiry has said the council's housing department was incompetent and that staff lacked care and respect for tenants. And finally, his name is usually up in lights, and now it'll be on the front of football shirts. Chart topper Ed Sheeran's been announced as the new shirt sponsor for his local football team, Ipswich Town. Here's Jonathan Brown.
So honey, now take me into your loving arms.
A master of the melodic ballad, Ed Sheeran sold more than 120 million records, though he says his true love has long been a sleeping giant of the football world. He grew up just a few miles from Ipswich Town Football Club and is often seen on the terraces at Portman Road. From next season, he'll be seen on the shirts.
He might be a global superstar, but he's local. He was brought up in the area, and this is his way to show his support for the club and the community as well.
This logo, the meaning of which he says will soon be revealed, will feature on both the men's and women's first team kits for the forthcoming campaign. He's not the first musician to make his support for his local side clear, though. Indie star Jake Bugg and rock band The Libertines have backed Notts County and Margate respectively.
He's doing something that is heartfelt and, I'm sure makes sense from a marketing point of view, but I wouldn't imagine that's the first thing in his mind.
Look, Ipswich isn't the most fashionable team going, but I think it's great, and I think it will produce a boost in shirts. Whether you're going to go around LA or Hollywood or see anyone wearing an Ipswich shirt over there, I don't know.
So whether this is the start of a League One club's rise to global fame or simply a declaration of love for a local institution, fans say they'll be hoping performances on the pitch have star quality. Jonathan Brown, ITV News.
How cute was Ed Sheeran as a little boy? Right, that's it from us this lunchtime. Mary will be here with the evening news at 6:30. But do go to itv.com/news where we'll have continual updates on those local elections in England, Scotland and Wales. News where you are follows the national weather. Bye-bye.